Alright, so time for part 3 of the iRacing Whelen Tour Modified Setup series. Today we'll be covering the springs and shocks for this car in particular. I mean, it'll translate to most oval cars, but I'll specifically be talking about some stuff with the modified in particular. Um, so yeah, I just need another about 30 seconds to get completely ready here because I gotta grab my notes and put it in a good spot. So I'll be just muting here for a second. Hopefully that little mute sound of the microphone isn't too annoying, but alright, let me load up iAnalyze Racing here. Today I picked Martinsville because this will be the 2017 Week 4 race for the Tour Modified series. And I think this is actually a very good track to demonstrate what the springs are doing, because obviously the springs and shocks control weight transfer of the car when you're braking and accelerating. And since you're doing a lot of heavy braking at Martinsville compared to a lot of other ovals, and getting on the gas in the Tour Modified at Martinsville is so important to getting good lap times, that this track actually works out pretty good for demonstrating how springs affect the car. So basically, the springs, they're one of the most, what do you say, like most intimidating part of the car. And you'll hear a lot of people. I mean, this is why we have fixed series. It's basically because the suspension can be such a pain in the butt to figure out. That's my Rockingham set. Let me get Martinsville set in there. Let's start with the warm. But the springs and the shocks will also fix the car in a way that once you have them figured out, it is so nice to have a car that is, how do I want to say it, like built for you, and you do it through the springs and the shocks. So today I want to kind of elaborate. What did the Milwaukee set up? Today I wanted to kind of elaborate and show a couple things that I typically do when I start trying to decide a spring set. And you'll see typically if you download a lot of my sets, or even if you go to other cars, oval cars, and you'll see generally people will stick to a certain set of spring sets just because they're so difficult to adjust. Because I mean, I can go in here and adjust that, and okay, so it adjusts the ride heights, it adjusts the cross weight. Well, it's not always that easy, because adjustments that you make to one spring influences the entire car, because now the shocks are working differently. The opposite spring gets affected, and since you're increasing the rear spring, it'll affect the way that the rear end handles. So it's to get these four components working together at all times can be really, really a pain, really a pain in the butt, for lack of a better term. But so basically, as a general synopsis, just a little like overview of what each spring does individually before we get into the more complex stuff. The left front spring, it will loosen the car on entry, and it will tighten the car after that. So basically, when you're braking in, when you're getting that the trail braking, especially here, you're going to do a lot of trail braking entering in the corner. The left front spring is pretty important here. So you know, if if your spring is too stiff, the car is just gonna basically snap right into the inside wall. I mean, you're gonna hit the inside wall faster than you can react to it. And that's why typically, like something like Martinsville, I actually use a pretty soft left front spring to prevent that from happening. Just because I want to control, I'd rather have the brake bias in the front control that the way the car is going to rotate. Because the more rear brake you use, the more, well, I mean, if you use more front brake, that's going to create more heat in the front tires. So typically, that's why you'll see that I try to aim for, in this car in particular, I try to aim for 67% brake temperature, or front brake bias to keep the brake temperatures down. Um, and then I'll usually tighten it as I go along, but we'll get into that. Uh, okay, right front spring. This spring typically can act like the front stagger, where really it's controlling the weight transfer as soon as you turn the wheel. A stiffer spring in the right front tightens the car on entry. And also, you got to think about the dynamic ride heights too. Stuff I showed in the last video with telemetry. The amount of weight that gets transferred between the front springs, and this is why it's crucial to make sure you have a good right front spring. It makes the ride heights work together. And when the ride heights are working together, it makes the car just feel hooked up. Because if you're in the corners, if your left front is higher than the right front, the car is going to feel loose. If your right front's too high on the right side compared to the left front, the car is going to be too tight. So when you can get these ride heights working together, thanks to the springs and a little bit of the sway bar, you can get the setup hooked up so well, and it will feel so great. But we'll get into more in-depth stuff once we get out on the track. Right now, I'm just trying to just talk about what the springs are. Just a general synopsis. The left rear, this will make it tighter on the exit but looser in the mid corner. I use this spring. I usually have a stiffer spring for any course where it's anything slow speed. And I define it like Martinsville's corner, a bull ring, South Boston, Lanier, a little bit of Five Flags. Can I think of any others off the top of my head? Southern National, any of the Legends, the ovals. I typically have the left rear stiffer than the right rear, and it's to control the weight coming off the corner to make sure that the rear end's going to stay planted when I hit the gas. So it's that's why you'll always see in a lot of my setups for the very little courses that left rear spring will always be stiffer than the right rear. I mean, it's I guess it's mostly preference because I've seen typically I'll grab other people's sets. I always try to download everybody's sets that I can find, and they'll have an even split in the back, but I tend to be a little bit more aggressive on the throttle than most people, so I typically like to have the left rear pretty stiff, just so when you originally get on the gas, the car will kind of jump, but then as soon as the weight's transferred, that left rear spring will keep it tilted onto the right rear and will tighten it. Keeps when you get on the gas, the left rear spring will help keep the weight transferred on the right side. The more weight on the right side tires means a little bit better grip. So that's why it tightens it up on exit, but it's looser in the mid center. And then the right rear, this much like the shocks, but I'll get into the shocks in a minute. Much like the shocks, it is this typically loosens the car in the middle of the exit and can also tighten entry, depending on what your spring rate is compared to your left rear. Typically, if you have a stiffer right rear than the the left rear, it'll be let's see here. I want to make sure that I'm looking through my notes. I want to make sure that I am going to say this right. Yeah, it will loosen the car under acceleration but tighten it under braking. So basically, it'll when you're braking, getting that trail braking in, this car will tighten up, but as soon as you get back on the gas, it's gonna get loose, and that's why typically on the smaller tracks they do have a soft rear spring, and then have everything else control the way that the car is gonna be tightened and loosened. That's why, like, very commonly that I'll use a 175-pound spring on, I think, anything underneath probably anything that's below 5/8 of a mile. Like Thompson, I will use a stiffer spring, but everything below that, I think I use 175 always, but just because this car has 600 horsepower and it is the behemoth. So it doesn't need to have more rotation than it already has. But on the bigger tracks, especially the plate tracks, I'll use 225, 250 for that, just because of the plate and the wide gear that you have to put into it. You'll typically want a right rear that's pretty stiff. So for my personal recommendations, now remember, these are personal recommendations. You don't have to follow these. But for the modified in particular, this counts for both the SK and the Tour. My range on the spring rate in the left front is anywhere from 425 to 500. Right front is typically 475 to 525. The left rear is either 175 or 200. The right rear is anywhere from 175 to 250. And this is for all tracks that the the official series will run on. So this is not including the road courses, and this isn't including super speedways. Because I would imagine if you're running, like, I don't know, like Michigan, you'd probably want a different spring set than New Hampshire for this car. But I don't typically run the modified at Michigan or anything. So I haven't, God, it's been a long time since I've done anything with any of the bigger super speedways. Okay, so moving on to shocks. I was gonna start writing down notes on the shocks, and honestly, for anything that I ever adjust on the shocks, in the previous videos, I have always shown that let me get that window up here. Why does that never want to show the first time I ever get it here? I don't know. What the heck is this? But, in the previous videos, I always show this shock tuning chart. And really, I started writing the notes for that. And I realized that all I'm doing is basically copying what's on that setup sheet. Because it's so like that setup sheet will always do everything that I want it to. Like, as long as I follow that, I get all the information that I ever need. Now, if this thing will ever frickin' work for me, there it is. Thank you. Alright, let's see. Probably about right there, so it doesn't look too stretched out. Oh no, I didn't mean that. Okay. So basically, I was just going to go through basically what's on this setup sheet, but this setup sheet does everything for me. This is the oval spring and shock tuning chart, and I put this on the setup shop because this thing has been so helpful for me. Just a couple tips for this one. This will tell you generally what each shock will do in the corners, but still, there's going to be some parts of this that you still need to. It doesn't explain everything. And mostly it's this the rebound here. The rebounds here are very very. This is what I was explaining when I was talking about the right rear spring, where it controls entry and controls exit. It'll do an opposite effect depending on where the shock is tuned. So you see, as you can see, it is. If you lower it, it's going to understeer more into the corner, but oversteer out of it, and vice versa. So the spring and the rebound on the right rear are some of the biggest adjustments that you can make on this car in terms of the way that the car is going to handle. Another thing too is this rebound here too, because compression and rebound in the left rear is more than just adjusting the setup or adjusting the numbers on it. The left rear shocks also control the way that the tire in the rear, the left rear tire, gains and loses grip. So a stiffer shock in the back. Let me make sure through my notes. Yeah, a stiffer shock in the back means it's going to have less grip for the left rear tire. So basically, you want to be able to control with the bump and the rebound how much grip that this tire has, and really, you're trying to adjust that grip level for what the right rear is going to have. Because if it's too stiff, then the tire's not going to have enough grip, and the car is going to struggle getting out of the corner. And by struggle, I mean it's going to plow really bad. Basically understeer you straight into a wall. And if you have it too soft, same thing. It's going to just understeer and you're going to spin out. The rear end is going to be too soft because of that left rear. So those three settings, the right rear rebound, the left rear bump and rebound settings, are pretty crucial to making sure that the setup is working correctly. And also, as I explained in I think it was the first and the second video, I think it was first video, the overall stiffness of the fronts and the rears too. Let me get that window off. I see this got moved over a little bit. Let me readjust that. There we go. Okay, so for the overall stiffness, because, the way I've explained it so far, you would think that this and this is the same thing, and it's not. You should know that it's not, but I'm just saying. Overall front stiffness of the springs, these two guys here, is going to make the car tighter overall. Overall stiffer bumps is going to make it tighter on entry. Overall rebound stiffness is going to make the chassis tighter overall, because these two control two different parts of the corner. The front rebound on the right front controls how the car gets off the corner. It's basically a stiffer rebound is resisting the weight, and a softer rebound is resisting less of the weight. So typically, a softer rebound is going to make it understeer more because it's getting more weight, and a stiffer rebound is going to make it oversteer. Typically, where it's all about the drives off the corner in a tight racetrack, especially something like Martinsville is a great thing, a great example. Lanier, Southern National was one. I always use a very soft rebound on the right front, And anything I consider quote unquote soft is really anything that's below half. So for this, I think it's plus 16. Yeah, anything that's 8 or below I consider to be pretty soft. I mean, plus 5 is really soft. I never really go down to 0. I try to keep at least 4 or 5 clicks as the softest setting. But regardless, um, that right front is it's actually a very handy tool because if the car feels tight off the corner, but the right or the the rear feels loose off the corner, like as soon as you get on the gas, the car wants to snap, but when you're off the gas, the car feels like it's just gonna plow straight into the wall. That is a that's a push loose condition. I hate that condition so much. That right front spring, this guy here can help you get rid of push loose. So it is your best friend out of all the spring and shock settings on this car. Yeah, it's one of my favorite. Moving on to the left front rebound. Stiffer rebound controls the weight entering the corner. So stiffer rebound tightens the car up. A softer rebound loosens the car up, and this is only on entry, only when you're on the brakes. So that's why you'll commonly see on my setups, I always use I think plus 10 is the lowest I'll ever go. It's anywhere from plus 10 to plus 14. And again, as I said, these are my personal ranges. I mean, you could find that a 550 and a 425, or yeah, like a 425 and a 550 front springs work at Martinsville. You just gotta find the ride height and the shock adjustments that'll help you with that. It's very, you know, like I said, these are just kind of my recommendations, and I only say that because if you're trying to learn how to set up a car, if you're just sticking to a range to begin with, it can kind of help you. And then once you are kind of more familiar, you can venture out of your comfort zone. Because I had to do the same thing too. I mean, I think the first 2 seasons I ever ran in the Tour Modified, I used the same setup for almost every single track. And then that's when I started to learn that, well, if you tighten or stiffen springs, the car just seems to act better, on different size tracks. And that's when I kind of realized that I got to do more than just run the same, run the same springs, adjust the track bars, and maybe the camber. So, moving on to the right rear, the rebound stiffness is this one. Like I was saying earlier, this is a pretty difficult one to just say that this is how it is and this is the way that it is. This rebound will help control the way that the car acts mid-center. So we're talking as soon as you start getting back on the gas and the wheel is totally cranked in the corner. So we're talking about right here. Probably a good reference point at Martinsville is like by these barrels where you're in the middle of the corner and you're not doing very much with the pedals and the steering wheel is cranked. You're locked at pretty much your preferred maximum steering lock for this track. Do not go full lock ever. Do not go full steering lock. You'll just burn off your front tires here. So this rebound, I only keep it typically from actually to about 0 to 5, because if you make it too stiff, the car can just it can just not, it can turn into how do I want to say, like lazy. The car just doesn't want to churn at all, and especially when the tires start wearing in a little bit, it can get detrimental. It can get exponentially worse over a run, especially on a hot track. Will amplify that more than a cold track. But this is typically a setting that I only stay between 0 and 4. And in fact, for probably the first year I was on the service, I never touched this left rear shock on any oval car. I left it at 0 or on the bigger cars, the NASCAR cars, they typically max out that rebound. But I saw on most of the modified setups that a lot of people, I'm talking the older tire models, usually put a +0 on there, and I never ventured out of that because these shock settings on this tire in particular they can they can be detrimental to the way that the car handles over a long run. So I tend to be pretty conservative when it comes to the left rear tire. So for the right rear, as I was saying earlier, this is the opposite effect of the corners. Understeer in, oversteer out is the softer setting, and then oversteer in, softer out is the stiffer setting. So it's really, or excuse me, did I say that right? Shoot, did I say that right? I want to make sure I'm saying that right. Excuse me. Yeah, if you want more oversteer, you increase the right rear rebound. Yeah. It's just like the spring. It's almost like this rebound almost acts as a mini spring compared to so if you want to adjust to it, not at the full 25, but you just want to adjust it just a little bit, the rebound can help fine tune that setting. So, alright, so let's get some laps in here. This is my 2016 Season 4 set. I have not tested this out yet. You're going to see the first few laps, so they'll probably be pretty bad because Martinsville is a track I've always had to kind of get warmed up on first before you get good lap times going. So, alright, let's make sure my pedals are calibrated. Okay. Shouldn't really have to explain much on how to drive this track. I mean, you want to brake as late as possible and get that car pretty much down to the yellow line as much as you can, and you grip it for dear life. I love this track, but even I'll admit that this is one of the most difficult courses to race on because modifieds in particular, we have a very, very wide bodied car. It's very narrow, and it is difficult to pass. Plowed a little bit out of the corner. Yeah, like I said, I'm going to need probably a few laps to get used to this again, because Martinsville is not in my opinion at least, a pick-up-and-go track. Yeah, like I said, was saying in the video earlier, Martinsville is typically a track where I try to have a low front brake bias, just because that way I can ram on the brakes and it's not going to lock up. Although I have noticed that this car, compared to other cars, doesn't lock up as quick as some other cars do. I think it's also just because there's not a lot of nose weight on the front. Because if there's too much weight transfers to the front, that can lock up the tires like almost instantaneously. That's why it's so easy in the Gen 6 car to lock your tires here. I mean, you'll see them do that in real life all the time here, and overheat the brakes and stuff like that. I can feel it. It might just be the driver, but I am feeling a little bit of push about mid-center. But I noticed that if I don't take the corner so aggressively, that it tends to not push as bad. Cause look at that there. I took it way too aggressively and I pushed right out. Kind of take this one conservative. Yeah, we can stick it right down there. So there is a little bit of a push. Last year I remember this track. If you had a hot weather session, this racetrack was unreal at how slick it was. So I think I had a tight car on purpose just because of how hard it was to drive this track at almost 120 degrees. Because yeah, that wasn't fun. We did one race like that. If I recall, there were a bunch of cautions in that race. Yeah, I got on the gas too quickly there, so I think I had to lift a little bit. But the key to this track, though, is don't fight the steering wheel. Be as smooth as possible. I know with a lot of short tracks, it's be as smooth as possible, but it is so evident on this track. Don't fight the steering wheel. Don't fight the car. Set up the car so it can be as smooth as possible off the corner, and that's why I picked that springs up. Okay, so I'll complete 15 laps and we'll send the car in and see what the tire temps are and maybe some things on the car. I mean, obviously this isn't going to be a setup prep video, but kind of what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to set up a baseline for myself using what I already know that works, and then I'm going to start adjusting the springs. And I'll show you how the spring rates affect the way that the car handles. Not only how it affects it as soon as you get out of the pits, but how it affects it over a run. Because that is the most crucial thing, is if you can get the suspensions working correctly, you can have a nice long run. Alright, so that was my fastest lap. That was my first lap. Okay, so that's one thing I can tell that I need a little bit more practice on, is the fact that my fourth lap was my fastest lap. Typically the modified, my first or second lap are typically my fastest, but, well, maybe not always. So, but yeah, as you see, like right there, I am like way right down on the yellow line. I think I even may have clipped it right there. Very close. I pushed out a little bit there, so that means that I still got time to gain. I was guessing when I entered here it was going to be somewhere in the 18.7s, and there was actually a very good example. Right there you can see too much brake and the front tire's smoking. That's why I don't like a high brake bias in this car, because that'll ruin your entire lap right there. But anyway, the reason why I wanted to run a few laps there is I wanted to talk about the way that the tires grip in the corners too with the springs. And this is another important part of picking your spring split, or your springs and your spring split in general, is yeah, I guess Chase is fine. When you pick softer and stiffer springs, the one thing else you have to remember is not only is it influencing the way that weight transfer is, it's also affecting the dynamic ride heights and the camber. So another thing you got to keep in mind, that when you are adjusting the springs, is you're going to have to pay attention to how the contact patch changes. Because when you think about this spring right here. If this right front's softer, that means that this car is going to lean over more. And not only is that more weight on the right side, so it's going to plow a little bit more. It's going to tighten up. This tire's camber is going to change because of the more weight. So a lot of times you got to keep in mind too that when you adjust the springs, this camber, the camber of the tires is probably got to change too. Because you'll see as the corner, as we go through the corner here, you get a little bit better view here of the tire. As you can see, like this, there you can see a little bit of daylight here in the tire. You know, especially when you're on the. Of course, this might just be iRacing's physical versus texture model. You can see a little bit of daylight in the tire, but having that maximum contact patch on a straightaway is not the most important part. It is as soon as you start hitting the brakes and you're starting to steer into the corner. Now you see, like this is what I was talking about. This is massive trail braking here. I'm already turned into the corner, probably. What'd you say? That's about 30 degrees or so, and so the brakes is shifting the weight toward the front. I'm steering in, so it's shifting toward the right. This is the time that when the right front tire has the most weight on it. So because the whole car is leaning on that side, that dynamic camber is changing, and you'll see in the corner, actually that's a good example, that almost this entire tire is hitting the road right now. Again, this is the inconsistencies with the iRacing. There's an invisible, quote unquote, physical model that the car drives on, and then they lay a texture over it. And basically, if you had never heard why that is it's to give that illusion that these tires aren't actually bending or anything, or they're not flexing. And so they have a physical model you drive on and a texture over top of it to make it look like you're getting the sensation that the tire's bending. And that's why at some tracks you can see some really bad inconsistencies in the track model. But they have been trying to go through all of them and trying to readjust them all. But I think there's still a few of the ovals, and I think Southern National's got one, and Five Flags has. I think in the most recent patch, 2017 or 2016 season 4, they patched out that one pit box where the car literally looked like it was hovering above the ground. And I still think that there's one part of that track that's still like that, but whatever. That's not crucial to this video. But anyway, like I was saying, what the heck was it? Oh, the dynamic camber of the right front tire and how important this is. So basically, you can see that when this is leaning over in the corner, it's got full contact patch. In Martinsville, this is so crucial to make sure that this tire matches up completely with the racing surface. Because if it's leaning too much on this inner tire, or this outer tire, excuse me, you're just not going to have any grip entering the corner. And likewise for the inner part, if it's leaning too much on the inner or the outer, really, it's just not gonna. You're gonna break loose when you're on the brakes. Heavy trail braking is so important at Martinsville. There's really only one way to drive Martinsville, and it's just heavy trail braking. There's no way that you can brake in a straight line and then churn into Martinsville. You need to get into the corner as late as possible. And you'll see too that what is our speed when we are about to brake? 122, 23, 24. So we hit at 125, and we're scrubbing off so much speed that we're losing about half of that. There's a lot of stress on these tires, and you got to adjust the springs to handle that. So what are we getting down to in the corner? So we're about 60. We hit 68 before I get back on the gas. So 125 minus 68, that's what? 65 minus 8. We're losing 50, about 57 miles an hour from the straightaway to the mid corner. You know, this is the course, and this is the most extreme, and this is actually why some people don't like this course. I love this course. This course is a lot of fun to me. But as you can see, as the rest of the corner goes, I'm on the gas. The front end's lifting. The tire that's actually getting the most stress right now is actually the right rear tire, but the right front is still getting this weight transfer. It's just the weight transfer from the pedals is now just only the accelerator, so it's going onto this right rear tire. But I'll talk about the way that the rear works in a minute. But I just want to put emphasis on making sure your front end is hooked up for a course like this, because it is so crucial. So, see it go through the corner, coming off the corner. And now the steering wheel is starting to decrease. I'm fully on the accelerator. I mean, you can see when the tires are fresh, I'm on the accelerator really early here. And I will always do this for qualifying. I try not to do this in a race, because at this point, you're putting a lot of stress on that right rear tire, and you'll burn it off quickly. But I was really trying to get just a solid 15 laps in to just get a nice baseline down. I mean, as you can see, I haven't even looked at the tire temperatures yet, because I'm so worried about the way that this front end handles. And the right front, what I've always done with the right front is, obviously, we always have a positive camber. If you're running an oval, you always have a positive camber on the inner tire. Always, always, always. There's no reason to run a negative camber on this tire, ever. So when this is entering the corner, this camber, this influences, what is it? I believe it is entry of the corner and a little bit of the exit of the corner, but it's mostly entry. And the reason why I always have a softer spring here is I'm basically allowing this camber, this dynamic camber, to what would you say, to have less effect. So basically, it's rolling over less, just because, well, this right front spring is stiffer, so it's resisting more of the body roll. So it's actually staying more onto this tire. And because of that, less camber in the corner is lost. Less of the positive camber is lost compared to this tire. As you can tell, that this is very difficult to explain, and this is why I actually delayed it 2 weeks, because really I didn't really want to do this video, because I felt like I was going to blabble in it. Because I know what I'm looking for, but it's really hard to put into words. So if you've stuck with me so far, I thank you. But you're getting down in this corner. You can even see, even on my best lap, I was smoking this tire. Because, let's see, this is braking and turning in, so the left front tire still has a good amount of weight on it, but the right front tire has the most weight on it. But you're gonna want to look into that. And like I said, Martinsville is typically a track I've got to put 100 laps on it before I go out and run a 90-lap race. You know, it's just the way that this place is. It's very, very difficult. It's a very fine line. But as you can see too, less of the dynamic camber is lost, and so when it goes into the corner, this middle and outer side of the tire, they're right planted on the ground. And you can even see there's still a little bit here. It's not being used, but it's really not that bad. Because really, I think more of the tire is used when you're on the. God dang it! Can you please get off? Thank you. All right. More of the tire is being used when you're heavy on the brakes, as you can see, like probably about right there where I'm turning in and there's heavy brakes. As you can see, yeah, like more of this tire is contacted on the ground. And then when it leans in more into the corner, when I'm starting to let off the brakes, this camber changes throughout the entire corner. And then when I get on the gas, you can see less and less of this inside patch. But really for this tire, you really just only concerned about getting that middle and outside contact patch as much as possible. The inside is a little, I don't want to say that it's you completely disregard it, because that is wrong. Because I've always said, you want to maximize your contact patch. But the one thing that you will do throughout running this car is you'll actually use this camber. Something I didn't actually say in the last video was you'll actually use this camber to adjust how loose and tight the car is too, because this dynamic camber of how much contact patch is on this inside, if there's more, if it's less positive, it's going to make it understeer, and if it's more positive, it's going to make it oversteer. That's why you'll actually typically see that I adjust these two, the two tires together, just because it just tends to make this car in particular handle a little bit better. Now, that's not saying that I always stick to that. Typically, I'll have, I think more often than not, though, and I think I do in this tire too. Okay, so for this course I don't, but if I looked in other setups, I think I always had the left front higher than the right front, and I think in terms of this number, don't look at the positive or the negative. This number is typically higher than the right side, and I think that accounts for all ovals. And the reason for that is when you have a higher degree, the number of degrees on the left front higher than the right front, that actually naturally makes the car pull to the left. That's why if you have a steering wheel that is 0% in terms of its steering offset, typically, like, you'll see this more in the Indy cars because it's on the bigger tracks, and even the Gen 6 cars, you have to kind of naturally hold the steering wheel a little bit to the right. Now, I'm used to that, so I typically just like to have this stay at 0%, and I like to just have a little bit of steering to the right. Again, that's all user preference. So basically, looking at my initial tire temps here, this was built, let's see, track temp 107, partly cloudy skies. That's very similar to what we have, 103. And this right rear is really cold compared to the right front. So last season, we struggled with keeping the car in line because of how slick the old surface model was. But now that the way that the temperature's changed a little bit, it seems like I can actually loosen the car now compared to what I did last year. So I'm gonna probably go 2 clicks down on there. I'm gonna adjust the springs eventually, but right now I actually just want to get a stable baseline, and then I'm gonna show you how the springs affect the car, because you're gonna see time gained and time lost based on those spring changes, and that's really how I began to learn how these spring changes are done. So, and we can go to the next corner, screw it. So for this rear end, entering the corner, obviously, when you're hitting the gas, oh wow, I went full brakes there. That's not very good by me. Naughty, naughty, naughty. But you can see that's what happens when you fully press down the brake pedal. The front tires will smoke. But entering the corner, this rear end will lift right up into the air, and that's when the rear end is actually the most vulnerable. AKA, it's, when it's up in the air, it's more it'll be at its loosest. So you're basically adjusting the springs to make sure that this rear end just doesn't break from underneath you. Typically, on entry, the way that the car is controlled is, in fact, the front springs. But if your rear springs are set to be loose as heck, you'll enter the corner and the rear end will just come right around. I mean, the rear end will, like, at this point, the rear end will just slide right around and you'll probably hit this logo over here. So, while the rear springs don't do a lot entering the corner, they're still crucial in the point of making sure that they're tied down in the corners. Because you think about this, when you're on the brakes and you're turning in, this left rear tire, and a little bit of the right rear too, they have the least amount of weight as possible. Now think about this later in the run too, when you only have a couple gallons in the tank. This front end is going to lift right up in the air. If your springs are stronger, that effect is going to be even higher. So your dynamic ride heights and a stiffer spring set are actually going to be higher into the air. So it can amplify that loose or tight condition based on that. But typically, when it comes to the springs, it's basically about mid corner here when these springs start influencing the way that the chassis is going to handle for the rest of the corner. So as you can see, I'm off the pedals right now, and you can see the ride height, the dynamic ride height. You know, this is right back on this left rear tire. You know, basically that sheet metal is almost right on that tire. And you don't really have to worry about it for this one because that right rear sticks out. But this is the point of when you start feeling the effects of the rear springs. So about right here, mid corner, start getting on the gas, and now this is when the rate's going to transfer. You can see it slowly transferring. And then that's when this right rear tire is getting the most weight put onto it. And if you have a heavy enough spring that's going to resist that weight transfer, that means less weight is going to be on this right rear tire, and that's going to be less grip. So it's going to oversteer more, and that is why. So typically, that's why on the tracks where you get down into these lower speeds, like anything below, I don't know, like 80 miles an hour, I typically have a left rear spring that's stiffer than the right rear, just to make sure that when I get on the gas, that weight is going to keep this right rear tire planted to the ground. And that is the most important thing. So, alright, so I want to adjust my shocks, and I want to, see, bring that up with, get the cross weight. So, actually, let's make my adjustment off iAnalyze. Okay. Alrighty here, so looking at the ride heights. So it looks like right now the right front's a little higher than the left front, which explains, hey, not only is the right rear not getting hot enough, but the right front is actually higher than the left rear or the left front. So that explains a lot about why I was going, oh, this car is just tight. This car is completely tight. Let's see what we got. Chat here. Chat says in your last setup video, when you showed the analyzer, it said that your rear ride height was hitting the ground and was going negative on the right rear. Yes. Sorry, I actually didn't go into that. That's actually a good thing to bring up too about the suspension. Typically, you want to pick, like, more often than not, you want to pick the most the stiffest springs to make sure, because the stiffest springs will give you the most grip. You know, it's the most weight transferring, but you know, it's that detrimental effect where if it's too soft, it's going to transfer too much weight. And also remember, when your springs are too soft, it'll make the car bottom out. In the case of Southern National in particular, what was happening there was one part of the track was making the car bottom out. So Basically what was going on, let's see if I can actually pull up. I don't know if, no, I don't think I have that telemetry stuff. I try to delete the telemetry files as I go along because they get pretty cluttered. But basically what was happening, actually let me see, do I still have it or not? Modified tour, yeah, okay, so I cleaned up these files. Basically what was happening is there's one part of the track in particular. Can I pull up a big map of the course? Yeah, this will work. Basically what was happening at Southern National was I noticed that the rear end was bottoming out like about right here and right here. So it was basically when the car was exiting the corner on full throttle. If it's only a very like one part of the track, it's usually not a big deal. Although, if you hear that it's scraping throughout the corner, you have to stiffen those springs. You do not want the car dragging. If it's hitting only like one or two spots on the track altogether, and that's only a very case by case basis, you typically don't worry about it. And the best example of that is I can't remember what year it is. I think it might have been 2013. 2014, the iRace for Life seminar, where Ray Afala and David Cater were sitting down and starting a beginner set, and they were at Texas Speedway. And the one thing that he kept asking David was asking Ray was, is the car bottoming out, or is it just bottoming out in one part of the track? Because Texas had some bumps on the lower grooves of the track. And if it's only hitting those bumps and bottoming out there and nowhere else, your ride heights might be fine. But if you enter the corner and all you're hearing is that chassis scraping, you really need to get the car adjusted. Get it up in the air either by ride heights or stiffer springs. Typically, if it is dragging all the way through the corner, you have to stiffen those springs. That's why you'll see probably like the IndyCar at like Iowa running like 2,500 springs, 2,000 to 2,500 springs or something like that throughout the setup. I don't know off the top of my head. I haven't run the IndyCar at Iowa in a long time, but just because the intense speed on such a small track with banking, if your springs are too soft, the underbody of that car is just going to scrape on the ground. You're going to ruin it, and the aero efficiency of that car is just going to go to junk in like 2 laps. On the modified, it's not as what do I want to say, like, it doesn't happen as often in the modified, but it can happen. So let me go back out there and let's go get some laps back in and see if we can get this car readjusted. Make sure I don't have the eye analyzer. There we go. I caught myself this time. I'm getting better. So there we go. That's going to be in the 6s. Barely in the 6s, but it did make it. And, of course, my next lap is going to be complete crap because I was paying attention to my lap times rather than paying attention to the track. So yeah, be as smooth as possible when you're on this track. Can be hard to do. This is a track that you gotta really practice. But this track is so rewarding once you have it down. Ooh. Yeah, you don't want to hit that inside. Like, you want to be as close to that yellow line as possible, but since that's where that grass starts, you know, it just lifts right up, and if your car lifts up from that, you're going to lose so much time from that. So as you can see, now that I'm being a little bit smoother, and I've loosened the car up a little bit, the car seems to be sticking to the ground a little bit more, even after I'll be completing my 9th lap here, right, because I started timing at lap 16. So basically, right now, I'm just trying to find a good set of ride heights that'll get good temperatures, and then adjust the ride heights from there. Because the right front was still a little too high, but I raised the car more, so it's just going to be worse. But I could either fix that by softening the spring or just, you know, lowering the ride heights, and that's what we're here today. We're here to figure that all out. So it seems like the car is acting pretty good. I think I'll just stop at lap 30 regardless, because I wanted to set a good baseline lap. Because basically what I'm trying to do here is I want to show what happens when you actually make these spring adjustments. Because it's not only like, oh hey, my car is tight on entry, so I'll just adjust the left front spring. One thing that some people don't realize is when you adjust one spring, it actually influences the diagonal spring. Think of it this way. You know how the cross weight is the percentage of the weight that's on the right front and the left rear? Yeah, so if you adjust the right front spring, it'll actually indirectly affect how the left rear spring is going to work too. And that's why choosing what springs you're going to use can be pretty difficult. So yeah, it was tightening up at the end of that run, but I've got my good baseline lap. That's pretty good for right now. So yeah, I got that temperature back closer. It's still going to need a lot of work, so I'm probably going to be spending some time working on a good setup for this, because the thing from last year, the setup from last year is working good, but it needs some work. So anyway, so let's go ahead and start adjusting this. Let me save this, because if you find something that works, always save a setup. Always save your own copy of it. Good thing about the iRacing software, you know, to help plug them, even though, you know, I'm not sponsored by them or anything. The iRacing software, I'll show you on here if you're ever interested in it. You can actually go back to any lap that you have. So, like, here's my fastest lap, and there's save setup used for this lap. It takes a snapshot of your setup every single time, and it'll even you know, it'll even give you the time of what the lap was too. So, you know, that's pretty cool. You know, and your setup will be in here. All your settings of what the springs were. So, you know, it's a nice handy little tool that's helped make setup fine tuning a lot easier for me. It's mainly why I use it. It's because I do the major stuff by feel, but then when I'm fine tuning, trying to get the setup just right, using a software like this just helps. So, okay, so the ride heights actually got a little bit better, but they're not great yet. But the car did visibly feel a lot better. But okay, so let's see. So should I do one at a time, or yeah, so let's reset that as close as possible. And this, as I was saying at the beginning of the video, this should loosen it on entry. So we're going to have to remember that when we go back out there and drive it. Typically when I drive, especially for these videos, I always try to do the same thing every time. That way if the car is looser or tighter, you could visibly see the car is, what it's doing. I don't try to over exaggerate, but sometimes I do. I kind of felt like I over exaggerated a little bit at Southern National, but some were pretty obvious. What the heck was that? Well, I don't know. Anyway, so even though this ride height is about the same, the one thing that we should see in telemetry is this spring rate actually stays higher in the air in the corners. So this actually might just solve my ride height issue between these two tires. Who knows? Or corners, I guess. I don't know. And also remember, it is going to loosen it on entry. Okay, so what I'm predicting is it'll probably be fast for maybe 4 or 5 laps, and then I'm going to struggle after that. Of course, if I get a poor run into the corner. Because another thing that it's doing too is because it's transferring more weight over to the left side, or the right side, excuse me, is that dynamic camber in the front's changing. Ooh, boy. Just to let you know there, that's user error. That's not the setup. You gotta... Another thing, too, is to identify when you're driving something wrong, too. And this is a perfect example. This lap right here is a perfect example of me just being an idiot. That's why typically for a track like this, I usually just shut up and drive. Because it's so crucial to get a good run into the corner. So I can visibly hear more tire squeal entering the corner. But one thing I've noticed is I really do need to get on the gas just a little bit later in order to make the corner. Now, like I said, for my driving style in particular, I like to get on the gas early and try to get the run out of the corner as fast as I can. And that's why I typically have a left front spring that's softer than the right front. But it's very common to see modified setups with even springs in the front, and I could understand that. Ooh. So basically right there, couldn't get the car down because it was loose. And what I mean by that is I had to kind of correct the wheel by turning a little bit to the right, and because of that I pushed up into the corner. As you can see, like right there, I can't get the car down the way I want it. And that's because of that little spring change. Actually the funniest thing about it is it's actually fixed by turn 3 problems, but turn 1 is still a little... Turn 3 is still, or turn 1 is still a little hairy for me. But like turn 3 is absolutely perfect. Maybe not perfect, but feels really, really solid. That was a pretty good corner. So yeah, only a 25-pound spring adjustment isn't really a huge difference. You would really feel the effects if you made this like, I don't know, like 575. Not out of the realm of possibilities. Wait a minute. That says too low. There we go. This is when you're going to start feeling the effects, probably after a couple laps. See, that's another thing, too, you got to keep in mind. A lot of times, spring sets don't actually take effect until the tires get worn in a little bit. It can feel great for the first 5 laps, but then it will break loose after that. It's because the tires are all heated up. You know, the heat cycle's gone through. But I believe having a left front spring higher than the right front, I believe they call that hillbillying the suspension, if I recall. Oh, boy. Funny thing is if I can figure out this car with that spring, I think I could actually get a faster overall time. Yeah, like, look at that. So on fresh tires, I could probably beat my personal best at that. Would I want this throughout the race? Probably not. Because when I'm in the middle of a race, I want to think about the race car as less as possible. You know, at least as possible, I should say. So yeah, with a little adjustment, I have figured out how to keep the car out of the grass, but it still wants to kick on me. So, yeah, I mean, like, when I'm in the middle of the pack, I want to think about the car as least as possible. In this set, I will admit it is fast, but I gotta think about it. See, turn 1, it feels like it dips down there a little bit, and the car will actually get pretty loose there. Turn 3, it just dives right in there. I do hear the tires squealing, so if we did a long run, you'd actually probably see a pretty significant fall off in the times, because I can feel the left front, or the left side tires in particular, are squealing as we go into the corner. So you wouldn't be able to keep this up all race. So maybe making that, again, that was user error, that was not the setup error. So again, making that kind of adjustment, you could probably do that for like qualifying and get a good lap time out of it. Just for the race, I will personally never do that. So, all right, let's load up that again. Let's go back to this. Let's see here. What should I do next? Oh, this one will be easy to demonstrate for the right front. Let's see. Bring that back down. I think that was almost the exact same right height we had before. This one will be easy to feel because that stiffer right front will tighten up the chassis. Probably after 5 or 6 laps, I'll be... By the way, what did that do to my... Huh. That's interesting. Tire temps are pretty close. Okay, that's actually kind of funny now that I'm going through this. The setup doesn't feel bad, so we'll see how it feels after a couple laps. Because diving it right into the turn 1, it feels so good. But I'm also hearing that right front squealing as I get on the accelerator. There we go, now it's starting to tighten up. So basically, the turn 1 entry is now beautiful, but the turn 3 entry suffers. You gotta love racing. You really, really gotta love it. So I guess at Martinsville, if you want a better turn 3 entrance, stiffer left front spring, and if you want a better turn 1 entrance, a stiffer right front spring. Alright, let's... Might shut up and drive here for a minute and just see how the car is going to feel. Yeah, you can see I'm losing time in turn 3 and 4. But like 1 is perfect. It's that little dip going into turn 1. It's not getting loose at there anymore, so that's interesting. I'll be honest, I've never done any adjustments that are this extreme. Like usually the tallest spring that I ever went was like 525, 550. Like I never go to 600, and I'm finding it hilarious because turn 1's entry is better, so I'm not necessarily getting a bad run out of turn 2. So I can be ultra aggressive in turn 1 and 2. But if I do that same line here in 3... Oh, wow. If I do that same line in 3, it won't work. Although it does seem like with the stiffer spring that there's a finer line turning in the corner, because if I don't get it nailed right down there, it tends to push on me right away. So there you go. There's actually a good case of it. I didn't get the car right down on the line, and it pushed way wide entering the corner. Seems to be a lot finer line. Yeah. If I take my time, you know, take a little time off. See, that's the problem, though, as you can see, is my time now. That because I gotta compensate, because I don't want to walk that fine line as much. You can see now the lap times are really falling off. I mean, car's handling great. I don't have any complaints, but it isn't fast. I mean, the number one thing is making sure that the car feels good, but number 2 is finding that speed. And right now, if I was trying to find speed, this is a setting I would throw out right away. Because even though I'm not struggling to get the car around the track, it's not fast. Alright, let's park it after this lap. I bet if I look at telemetry, it'll be that right front's gonna be right in the air. I'll just briefly look instead of just pulling it up on here. Let's see, ride heights. Yeah, it grew about 1/10.5. Let's get the, yeah, let's go ahead and just put it up here. You see, reference is my best lap, and the minimum ride height, which is usually like this part of the corner, like when you're diving it right in, right about there, and a little bit about right for turn 3, it's about right there. So I look at minimum ride heights to adjust the front end, and as you can see, this is about 1.3, very close to it, and 1.33, whereas right here is 1.32. 1.47. So that ride height is hanging in the air all like throughout the entire corner versus with the softer springs. Let's see here. Data's blue, so let's turn off this right here. But you can see into the corner at like no time does the right front almost even out. Like there's a few, like maybe look at little spots here and there that they get even, but for the most part that right front's just slammed into the air. It's not very good. But that's what I was saying, is like at the beginning of the run it's probably gonna feel good, and I was right. And the thing that surprised me was this adjustment in terms of feel, it felt great, but it just wasn't fast. So what happens if I do? What happens if I do a 400 spring? Just out of curiosity. I gotta stop this. Should stop this and move on. Actually, I should probably put that more in the air. There. I think, yeah, 2.88 was about what it was before. Oh my god, I've been streaming for an hour and a half. So yeah, basically the rest of this video is just going to be me talking about what the springs do. I mean you can visibly see what it's doing here. Oh, hi. So you know, trying to visually represent what the springs do and how you want to adjust them. Holy crap. Yeah, you could just feel... I could just feel that the front end has so little grip. Or, it's so lazy in the front, I can't... The car just doesn't want to steer into the corner. And that could be because softening that right front spring could have probably affected the way that the rear end transfers weight too. Remember, like I said, it's that diagonal, that cross weight adjustment. So it's probably affecting the way that the left front acts on the rear end. Wow, this this setup is so garbage. See, because what's happening is there's too much weight transfer, and there's too much weight hitting that right front tire, and there's no grip. you gotta find that sweet spot, and this is not the sweet spot. So yeah, I hope this helps in terms of how you want to adjust your front of suspension. I do think that the rear suspension's a little bit easier to adjust than the front suspension, but yeah, sorry. I was gonna do I tried to do a longer run, but my god, that set sucked. Wait a minute, where's Martinsville? There it is. So one thing I gotta pay attention to here is if I do like a 300 spring. Oh my god, that throws this car straight in the air. Yeah, look at how much cross weight that adds. Let's go ahead and get rid of some of that, shall we? So that's about what it was before. About right there. So basically the left rear, it's going to make it loose in the middle and tighter exit. So my prediction is this thing is going to plow so hard off the corner. Might be fast for like the first couple laps, but it's definitely not going to be faster after that. But yeah, you can see. Yeah, not too bad. I was going to say, if I was within a tenth of my optimal time, a set that I know the suspension's working together in, if I got within a tenth of that, you could see that is why I actually have a left rear spring stiffer than the right rear on the lower speed tracks, because I use this left rear spring to help keep the car in line. On those on the smaller tracks. Because remember, you got a lot of power, and this car wants to just go. Oh god, I gotta stop talking. I say I gotta stop talking, but I gotta keep talking because I'm making the video. But yeah, you could. I'm not gonna do any more laps. You could really feel how the car. I could really feel how the car, like as soon as I jump onto the gas, it just gets so lazy. Let's see if I can spot a good example of this. Yeah, like right there, like as soon as it got mid corner, it just didn't feel very good. So I think I just got it too stiff. See, about right there when I was getting on the gas, I could feel the car, and you could see it even, like even when I'm... Usually I try to be pretty neutral in the steering when I get to about this part of the concrete, and you can see I'm still pretty much cranked the entire way to keep the car in line. Now when the tires are fresh, this is not going to really affect the car. It's when the tires are worn in a little bit, you'll actually start feeling the front tires give away from you. So that's why the times really weren't too far off of what I got in my original stint here. But guaranteed, if I went 15-20 laps, you'd start seeing a huge fall off. Let me just reload that. So yeah, right rear is pretty easy. It's gonna take crossweight out, but let's see what it is. That's close enough. But it's basically gonna keep that. It's gonna keep less weight on that right rear tire when you get back on the gas. So you might get a few quick laps out of it, but guarantee it's gonna get loose a lot quicker. That's why I typically have very soft springs in the back, and then I just control a lot of it with stagger. So yeah, like I was saying earlier, tighter under braking, looser on the throttle, and I could barely dig it into the corners right now. So yeah, there we go. Okay, let me go try to do that again. If I do this for too long, it's going to start affecting the way I usually drive the car, so... You try to take it a little bit easier going into the corner. Which at Martinsville, when I'm saying go easier into the corner, that usually doesn't mean the setup's right, so... That helps you out anyway. You know, for the most part, when you're on the bigger tracks, anything like 5/8 of a mile over, you typically do want the right rear to be stiffer than the left rear. And that pretty much goes for almost every single car, I believe. But for anything lower than that, I will typically always have a left rear spring. And as you can see, it is... You can get some quick times out of it. But you can see it within 3 laps of this stint. I'm already struggling to get it off the corner without it breaking loose from me. I mean, the good thing is a little less steering lock, a little less steering angle does help cure it. But man, turn 2 is really loose, I'm not gonna lie. Turn 4 isn't too bad. But turn 2, it is an animal to get it off the corner. As I said before, if you've got to feather the throttle out of a corner, that means this setup is not good. Because this car is all about getting that run off the corner. It is so crucial in the Tour Modified in particular to get that run off the corner. Because that is where all your speed, all your lap times are, is the run off the center. Not going to blame the setup on that one. I hit the yellow line. I mean, the good thing with this kind of setup, though, is you can adjust the shocks to work with it. And that's what I was saying before. You could really use any kind of shock and spring setup. You just got to figure out a way to make them work together. Because, I mean, you'll download people's setups, and they'll have different springs and shocks in them. Yet, they can sometimes run about the same times with them. It's all about how you drive the car. Whew. Car's not liking me right now, and I keep hitting the wall, and that's not going to help. So yeah, that's why I never have a very stiff spring in the back. Especially for these smaller courses. So at least with the right rear, it's visibly obvious that it just makes it a dirt modified off the corner. Alrighty. And the funny thing is if you probably look at the tire temperatures, that right rear is cooking. Yeah, you can see that it's cooking. So, yeah, you want to... You know, and this is what I was trying to explain earlier, you know, like, if you find a good spring set, it feels so good. It's just putting the time in to figure that out. And that's kind of why I had the videos for the basic stuff, basically everything else but the shocks and the springs, because these are the most difficult part of the car to figure out. God, I've been streaming for like an hour and a half. I should probably end this video. But in terms of the shocks, I'll talk about the shocks briefly. And with the shocks, they're mostly used as a fine tuning because, like, for example, in the laps you just saw me run, I was loose as heck as soon as I would get on the throttle, and it was clearly evident. Thing is you could have adjusted. You could have dropped this bump stiffness down to 0 clicks, and it probably would have cured nothing. I typically will use the shocks as a fine-tuning adjustment. Really, a lot of short-track cars, you want to pay attention to the ride heights and the springs before the shocks. And when it starts to feel good, when it starts to feel okay, good, that kind of level, then I start to go to the shocks. Because the shocks in short-track cars tend to be... They tend to be just helpful tools. They tend to... And the thing is, though, is again, like what I was saying, is when you have those shocks just right, when the front and the rear shocks are working together, or the right side shocks are working together to get out of a corner, that is when the car feels the best. And when the car feels great, you're going to get consistency. When you have consistency, you're going to find speed. And when you have speed... That's what wins races. When you win races, you win championships. It just all escalates. But really, my general synopsis before about the bump and the rebounds really just kind of holds. And shocks really are all about feel. It's just how much of this, you know, because I know people that would probably like to have, you know, almost maxed out bumps. You know, it's gonna make the front end lock up easier. It's gonna make it understeer more into the corner, but some people might like that. I like it to be pretty neutral, even a little bit loose center in the corner, but not a lot. Because I don't want the car to spin out on me. So, all right. So I think I'm going to end the video. Like I said, I still got the discussions up on the modified forums. In terms of talking about the suspension components, I'm basically all done. And I'm not done with the series because I figure there's still a couple videos to go. But for the most part, my opinions and kind of a synopsis about how the car handles, in particular with the Tour Modified, how it handles all these adjustments, has been said. So if there are still questions to answer, um, I have that forum post, and just remember, I'm always a PM away. I have answered many people's questions. I don't know if I answered them all. I try to get to them when I can because I'm trying to just be helpful for everybody. Because the main reason that I started this whole series was because I love this car so freaking much. This car is the most fun I've ever had oval racing ever. You know, I used to play the old NASCAR games. I played, you know, dirt games here and there, but on iRacing, when I tried out, I have all the oval cars bought, and this is the car that every time I climb into it, I just have a smile on my face. Like, typically when I actually run week 13, when week 13 comes around, is I will take a week off from this car where I won't even load it. I won't even look at it until at least that Sunday before the new season starts. And when I get back into that car after a week of running every other car, there's a smile on my face because I love this car so much. So, like I said, I've tried to make these videos. Hopefully they're helpful so I can help out anybody. You know, if there's any, you know, all the little questions can be answered here. If there's anything not covered in the videos, I have in the Tour Modified subforum, I have a post about this. I'm always a PM away, either on iRacing or heck YouTube, but iRacing I check more than YouTube, so on iRacing it would be better. And alright, so I think I'm going to end the video here. I hope you guys enjoyed. If there's anything else I did not cover that anybody thinks they should cover, I mean, that could be a separate video on its own. But for the most part, I hope you find these helpful, and I hope you give the Modified a try if you haven't. Or I know some people, they struggle figuring out the setups. They love the car but don't know how to set up the car. Because one thing, like I said, is seeing like a 500-pound spring and a 175 spring in the back, you almost never see this for any other car. I think maybe like Silver Crown and Sprint cars, you'll see such a big split. But for the most part, oval cars tend to be pretty stiff rear springs. And I think even like the NASCAR stuff, they're running like 300 to 350 springs in the front and like almost like 1,000 spring in the right rear. You know, so this car is very unique in terms of the way you got to set it up. And another thing with the NASCAR cars is they typically will have like the bumps and rebounds maxed out, and this is not a car you typically want to do that. I mean, I actually used to run maxed out bump stiffnesses, but that was because of the way that the car was like a year or two ago with the way that the stagger was. But ever since they adjusted, you know, this car to be a lot looser, and after that that's when I actually started to dive in and adjust the shocks correctly. And funny thing is I found some consistency in that. So, all right, so I hope you guys enjoyed. You know, have a good day, and see you on the track. Have a good one.